Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. Welcome back to Law, Land and Reality. Today we're discussing the Israel-Palestine conflict and not as a distant observers but as people trying to understand how law, humanity, media and activism all intersect in one of the longest conflicts in the world. And this episode isn't about taking shortcuts or giving emotional soundbite. It's about slowing down and asking, if international law exists, why does injustice continue? And more importantly, what realistically needs to change? And to explore this, we look at the different conflict through the different roles because no single perspective can explain everything. So, with me today is all of our respective guests. Can you guys introduce yourself?
So, hi, I'm Amira, and I am an activist of the Palestine.
Hi, I'm Darlina and I am influencer. Hi, I'm Nalia and I am a legal expert.
Hi, I am Atelia and I am a doctor.
Darina, as someone who's been active on social media, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about this conflict?
One major misconception is that this conflict is simply too complicated and purely religious. Online, people often say, we shouldn't talk about it because both sides are wrong, but that mindset actually shuts down meaningful discussion. When you break it down, the issue revolves around occupation, displacement, and denial of the basic rights. Palestinians face restrictions on movement, housing, education, and even family life. When people understand that this is about daily survival and structural inequality, the narrative changes from confusion to accountability.
Agree with you, Dadina. From an activist perspective, oversimplification is actually dangerous. When suffering becomes abstract, people stop caring about it. So this conflict isn't just a headline; it lies with experience. When injustice is normalized, it will become invisible, and that's when it lasts the longest about this issue.
Moving on, Miss Nat, let's bring in the legal perspective here. Why is territory such a central concern about this issue?
Okay, so from my expert, territory is central because international law recognizes the right of people to self-determination. Since 1967, the West Bank, Gaza, and also East Jerusalem have been considered occupied territories. Occupation under international law is meant to be temporary. However, continued settlement expansion permanently alters the land, and this directly undermines the possibility of a future Palestinian state because borders become fragmented and unstable. So without clear territory, sovereignty becomes impossible.
And that legal reality rarely makes it into social media conversation. People argue emotionally without understanding that these actions already violate established international principles. When law is ignored, misinformation fills in the gap.
Jerusalem adds another layer. For Palestinians, Jerusalem isn't just a land, it's identity, history, and also access to religious life. When control over holy site is restricted, it deepens anger and alienation. So law and emotion are deeply connected there.
And next, Miss Tia, how does this conflict translate into every medical realities?
From a hacker perspective, the impact is severe and ongoing. In places like Gaza, hospitals often lack electricity, clean water, medicines, and also functioning equipment.
Medical professionals are forced to make impossible decisions under constant pressure. International humanitarian law clearly protects civilians and medical facilities, but quick enforcement means violations often go unpunished. Beyond physical injuries, the physiological trauma, especially among children, is overwhelming and long-term.
Oh yes, Miss Dia. So this highlights a serious failure of enforcement. And legal protection exists on paper, but without accountability, and they don't translate into real safety for civilians or healthcare workers.
I'm sorry if my question sounds sensitive, but if the law exists, why does this keep failing?
So one key challenge is political paralysis. So international bodies, especially the UN Security Council, are often blocked by the veto powers, and this prevents by election even in the face of clear violation. So there's also a power imbalance and negotiation assume equity. But when one side controls bodies, military force and also resources, fair compromise becomes extremely difficult.
But I think another challenge is about selective enforcement. Some states strongly defend international law in one situation, but they ignore it in another. This inconsistency weakens the trust in the international law system and also sends the message that law is actually optional in that country.
Oh, yeah. Social fatigue is another issue. People become desensitized. When suffering becomes repetitive content, engagement drops, and silence replaces outrage. That silence allows injustice to continue.
Last but not least, let's move to the solution, not the idealistic one, but the realistic steps that we all can take.
Okay, so from my part, legally, the foundation already exists. Borders must be based on international recognized principles, such as the 1967 lines, with genuine negotiation. Settlement expansion must stop because peace cannot exist while land continues to be taken. And most importantly, accountability must follow investigations. And without consequences, international law loses credibility. So from my part, from a humanitarian standpoint, civilian protection must be immediate and unconditional. Medical access, humanitarian aid, and infrastructure protection are not political matters; they are legal obligations.
So socially, shared spaces like Jerusalem require international safeguard. At the same time, peace, education, and also dialogue are also crucial. Trauma and hatred are passed down through generation unless they are actively addressed.
Globally, recognition of Palestinian self-determination must go beyond statement. It should involve strengthening institutions so Palestinians can govern effectively and represent themselves with dignity.
So, our main finding is clear. The problem is not the absence of law, but the absence of political will. International law already provides a roadmap for peace, but selective enforcement, power imbalance, and also global inconsistency prevent the real implementation. And this conflict is not just about the land, it's about whether justice applied equally to everyone. And for all my distinguished guests today, I want to thank you guys so much for coming in to voice out your opinion. And thank you so much for our beloved viewers for watching Law, Land, and Reality. This isn't just a conflict, it's a test whether international law truly stands for what it promises. And always remember, hashtag Free Palestine.